Good evening, everyone. We're Group 8. In this presentation, we shall be discussing performance appraisal. Strong performance appraisals are the backbones of effective performance management. They ensure effective outcomes of performance management are realized. To start, this page gives you a very brief overview of the presentation. It will be in 6 parts, and we'll go through them one by one. So, what is a performance appraisal? It is the ongoing process of evaluating employee performance. By definition, performance appraisals determine to what extent employees are achieving the requirements of their jobs. They are based on realistic and measurable criteria that are clear, realistic, and achievable. So let's have a quick recap of the things covered in Lecture 4. Human resource management process is a systematic process of managing people working in the organization. It starts from human resource planning, and it goes all the way down to employee separation. Performance appraisals is essential in developing qualified employees, as it helps the organization to decide which employees to recommend for promotion, for laid-off, for wage increase, or for special training. Performance appraisals has 4 basic functions. First, appraisals is essential for making many administrative decisions, such as selection, training, promotion, transfer, wage and salary administration, and etc. Second, it provides adequate feedback for the employee on his or her performance and development. Third, it evaluates the efficiency and the effectiveness of related human resource programs. And finally, the documentation of appraisal provides evidence that supports management decisions. Even though performance is appraised annually, it has to be managed all year long. So here are some of the methods of performance appraisals that are commonly used. From the point of view of the organization, performance appraisal serves the purpose of maintaining organizational control in order to ensure that the work-related activities of subordinates are consistent with and contributing toward the accomplishment of organizational objectives. Controlling, or as known as the control process, is the managerial process for measuring progress towards planned performance and, when required, taking corrective actions. The basic control process includes 3 steps, and we'll look into each step in the following slides. The first step in the process is concerned with measuring actual performance. Measuring performance is a vital part of monitoring an organization's progress. Once the standards have been determined, then measurements of performance can be done in several ways. Following are some of the sources of information for measuring performance. Data can be collected through personal observation, statistical reports, oral reports, and written reports. The next step in the control process involves comparing the actual performance with standards laid down in order to find the deviations. Some deviations from the standards are justifiable because of changes in environmental conditions or other reasons. But when performance deviates far from standards, managers must determine what changes are necessary. Managers need to understand the contributing factors of a problem and then figure out a workable solution. In case of poor performance, corrective action is necessary to help the employee to meet the expectations. Examples of corrective actions are training programs, disciplinary action, and changes in compensation practices. Sometimes, variations may occur due to an unrealistic standard. Corrective actions can also include changes made to the performance standards by setting them higher or lower, or even identifying new or additional standards. This diagram may give you a very brief idea of how managerial decisions are reached in the control process. We'll then move on to give you some background information about the HSO we selected.
Thanks, Vivian. The example we apply this time is Harmony House Limited. We have interviewed an employee about his appraisal experience in this NGO. As the NGO appraisal system is under the guideline of lump sum grant, Manual Chapter 5. The appraisal purpose should conform staff development, salary adjustment, promotion, and performance management. It also emphasizes the joint participation of manager level and subordinate level to set up the appraisal system, and it should be accepted by both parties. Let's know more about the background of this NGO. Harmony House Limited is the first shelter service center in Hong Kong, which is established in 1985. It aims to provide shelter service for abused women and their children. It not only provides community support and education, but also provides professional training for multidisciplinary human service and advocate the policy and legislation anti-domestic violence. The work position revealed this time is social worker for female shelter. As the interviewee observed some unfair and subjective appraisal design for the shelter social worker, we may select the appraisal form of social worker as an example to have an analysis. The social worker is responsible for casework and therapeutic group for abused women and their children. Aftercare for target women and their families are also important. Social worker also needs to intervene family crisis and follow up hotline. Shelter management and operation also required the assistance of social worker. So, these job descriptions should be the foundations to consider the rating of appraisal indicators. The appraisal form is composed of 9 sections. Here is a link of the sample of appraisal form. So firstly, please click in the link and have a look at the appraisal sample. Firstly, please look at the Excel file part 1. There are 2 parts focusing on basic workplace performance and professional performance on management and application of professional knowledge. Part 1 covers more than 40 indicators to describe the various work performance. While in Part 2, it is composed of previous goal and goal planning in coming year. Supervisor and appraisee will work together to review the result of previous goal and the future tasks. It is much clearer for both to check the progress of goal achievement. According to the evaluation of Part 1 and Part 2, the room of improvement and comment for the rating will be revealed in Part 3. So as you can see, the section 5 and 6, the training needs and over comments will record this content. Finally, the most important thing is the grading for the overall performance. Suppose it is the standard for the salary increment. In this sample, it raised the performance by 5-point scales. However, it roughly divides grading from very poor to very good. Not clear statistic background for measurement are similar as most NGOs. The confirmations of appraisal requires the signatures of appraisee, supervisor, and even upper supervisor. After the brief introduction of appraisal form, we can recognize the table is applied with graphic rating scales. The actual job performance of staff can be simplified as items to be key performance indicators for the evaluator to rate scale. So, as the example you can see here, many NGOs generally employ graphic rating scale because its pattern is convenient. Its advantages can be briefly summarized as below. During the appraisal process, it facilitates the active participation of both appraiser and appraisee as they can view the indicators easily. Moreover, these indicators can be developed and concentrate the main characteristic of employees' actual job performance. In addition, specific feedback can be given for the staff's job performance and cover more different aspects. The last but not least, the rating scales provide a measurable guideline for both supervisor and staff to review their performance and save more time to explain this indicator in detail. When many NGOs employ this similar appraisal pattern, I want to invite you to share your experience through the multiple choice. So, do you think which one is the most common problem you may face in your appraisal? Please use 30 seconds to select your answer. Thank you.
And now, I would like to talk about the identified problems in Harmony House, which we have interviewed one of the social workers previously. First of all, A performance appraisal provides information in which the supervisors will decide corresponding managerial actions to the employees. The process and consequence or possible disciplinary action should be fair and justified. However, an appeal system and procedure was to be established should the employee disagree with the appraisal. HSO should provide a clear guideline and path for employees to appeal the disagreed performance appraisal. Under this condition, employees can be safeguarded from the improper use of disciplinary actions. They also have the right to appeal if they disagree with the appraisal or disciplinary actions determined according to SQS 5 guideline. However, according to the interviewee, she revealed that she perceived the systemic disadvantage and perceptual errors from the appraisal process, but she lacked of appeal path regarding the disagreement of the appraisal result. Ultimately, she either signed or not signed the appraisal. Second, performance appraisal should be playing the role for staff development and is also viewed as one of the functions. Supervisor could also identify the strengths and weaknesses of employees on their present job and provide information for supervisor to consider the proper training for employees. Under this condition, employees can be given opportunities to perform at the level of competency required in current or future challenges and achieve their personal goals in the areas of achievement, satisfaction, and self-fulfillment. However, from the interviewee should reveal that the performance appraisal made no impact in providing proper training activities for her development, even not being recommended for any internal trainings. The performance appraisal was relegated to the role of a mirror, just showing how her performance looks, but providing no support or guidance to do about it. Even that she tried to seek possible training programs from outside, her employer did not recognize and provide guidance or sympathy for her. Third, measuring the actual performance is essential in the performance appraisal process. By understanding, performance appraisal should avoid systemic disadvantage, which should be include the relevant indicators and exclude irrelevant indicators. Second, to avoid the perceptual errors as well as the selective perception from the supervisor. For example, the harm and halo effects. These were the cognitive bias from the supervisor, which they were usually having the tendency to be affected by the first impression on their employees. These factors might usually bring biased judgment on their employees. Third, performance appraisal should make good assessment of work performance during the interview process. The behaviors and outcomes being assessed are stated in clear behavioral terms and make sure that the employees understand the measures being used and agrees the measures are fair and accurate. Besides, try to collect performance information from different sources if possible. So, under this condition, employees can be fairly evaluated and receive recognition for achievement and contribution. However, from the interview with the social worker in Harmony House, she revealed that it was a single performance appraisal method, and the performance appraisal was conducted by her supervisor only. Fourth, motivating the employees. Normally, performance appraisal process is carried out for several reasons. To identify top performers, reward them with increment accordingly on base of performance appraisal, and to get rid of the bottom performance and put them in skills capability improvement plan. By considering Maslow's hierarchies of needs, we understand that money was part of the deficiency need and was considered as a significant motivator in filling the bottom two needs of a human being. Of course, there are some other theories argue that salary was not considered as a motivator, even not one of them, but the intrinsic factors were, like the achievement, recognition, or the work itself. In the aspect of this discussion, which could be found in Herzberg's two-factor theory. However, we understand that money was making effects on one's motivation in work. Regarding the organization itself, it's supposed to be looking internally at talent and career progression in order to retain key employees by motivators, including relating rewards to performance, such as promotion or salary increment. So, under this condition, salary increment occurs when the employees were getting good performance and were well deserved, which means the compensation is contingent on performance. It would ultimately bring satisfaction, performance, and productivity from the employees, as well as recognition. However, from the interviewee, she claimed that the performance appraisal made no impact on the decision of salary increment. Quite often that the salary increment was just based on terms and conditions instead of performance. It based on the project funding instead. As far as she knows, the whole process was perceived just as a regular activity. And for the
theoretical applications to the administrative problems, our group has some recommendations to corresponding problems. Performance appraisal is a continuous process emphasizing the importance of ongoing communication between employees and their managers to ensure performance improvements. We can go details in the following diagram. Step 1, job analysis. It aims to evaluate an employee's performance. It must be based on the organization mission and objectives and the job duty. Step 2, develop standards and measurement methods. We will discuss performance measurement methods such as rating system in the following slides. Step 3, informal performance appraisal. As the definition states, performance appraisal is an ongoing process. Employees are needed to have regular feedback on their performance to know how they are doing. Step 4, to have a formal performance review with the boss once or twice a year. The key points of the diagram is communication and regular feedback. Refer to problem 1, unclear guideline of the appeal system. The main point of the problem may be the lack of communication and process of feedback, and that problem may be avoided. Researchers found that performance feedback is a process of providing information to workers with suggestions for improving performance, occurring in an informal meeting or in daily. And the frequent and regular feedback can help an appraisee overcome problems and their job performance. Also, researchers identified that two-way communication is a critical component of correcting problems. For a appraisee to know whether he can meet the standard, eventually to perform organized or supervisor's expectations. For appraiser to know the progress and appraisee performance. Here's our recommendation to optimize the appeal system. When the employee had disagreements of the appeal results, it was advised to update the process of appeal system in the staff manual and mentioned in SQS 5. He or she has the right to appeal the results to chief executive, file a written form within 2 weeks, and the CE has a meeting with the employee within 2 weeks. If the employee also does not satisfy with the result, he or she has the right to appeal to board of directors. As a result, a clear policy and appeal system will be formed for tackling employee problems. Refer to problem 2, not playing the role for staff development. Also under the framework of appeals process, we suggest to provide a regular supervision rather than only one final performance supervision. We suggest that achieve the function of staff performance appraisals. Therefore, supervisor could identify the employee's strengths or weaknesses. Also establish individual training needs and enable organization to identify training needs, analysis and planning for offering adequate support and assistance to employee. Refer to problem 3, not measuring the actual performance. To ensure a positive effect of performance appraisal, the rating system used should be reliable and valid to effectively discriminate between certain levels of performance. Under that understanding, and one question may be asked, what do we assess in the appraisal form? There are 3 types. First, trait approach. The traits that have a direct relationship to the essential functions of the job. Second, behavior approach measures what individuals do at work. Third, result approach simply a measure of the goals achieved through a work process. When we go detail in the agency's appraisal form, supervisor would assess the goal setting. For example, to evaluate whether the worker can hold at least 2 therapeutic groups for the super users. In previous year, some indicators were assessed the hardworking and on-time behaviors. Finally, some indicators were assessed the understanding of client needs and empathy, which was essential trait for doing a social worker. To conclude, the appraisal form is appropriate in using measurable and observable factors to evaluate performance, but we commit about rating system. The selected HSO is used graphic rating scale only, hence we cannot provide in-depth information on job behavior. Our group recommends using BARS form to replace the graphic rating scale. BARS can clearly define the scale labels and echoes used in performance rating. It can provide an actual description of the performance, which means rubrics that describe in some details about the differences between 5 grades. rather than only one simple word, very good or good. As a result, BARS form overcome the problem of subjectivity to become more objective, accurate measures. And from employees' opinion, the performance appraisal was conducted by his supervisor only. We would like to optimize the system of raters. We suggest to use multiple raters, unlike traditional performance reviews, which provide employees with feedback only from supervisors. We suggest three parties involved in appraisal form. First, a supervisor appraisal properly major factor for the appraisal. They are usually knowledgeable about job requirements, are positioned to provide rewards for effective performance. Second, peer appraisal. They may know better than supervisor, more directly affected by the employee's action. Third, subordinate appraisal provide a different, meaningful perspective on a supervisor's performance. To conclude, multiple rater can be more objective measure of a person's performance. There are some drawbacks. An appraisal system involved many evaluators will naturally take more time and more costly. All parties must know the evaluation criteria, the methods for gathering and summarizing the feedback to the workers.
The expectancy theory of motivation and Maslow's list hierarchy theory or the respect to factor theories. They pay attention at the relationship between internal lists and the resulting effort expected to fulfill them. Expectancy theory does not concentrate on it, but focus on outcome instead. The expectancy theory hypothesis that is in order for a person to be motivated, his effort, performance, and the motivations must be linked. Is proposed three variables to account for it, which he called a valence, expectancy, and instrumentality. Expectancy is the belief that increased effort will induce increased performance, which means if I work harder, then the performance will be better. It's affected by such things as more time, more resources, or more skill were used, or more supporting for the performance will be better. Instrumentality is the belief that if you perform well, the value outcome will be received, which means if you do a good job, there is something in it for me. It is affected by such thing. Clear understanding of relationship between performance and outcomes. For example, the rules of the reward, my teammate has mentioned it before, the trust in supervisor who will take the decision on who get what outcomes, or transparency of the purpose that is who get that what outcome. Valency is important that individual based on the expected outcome. For example, if I am mainly motivated by money, I may not value offer of additional time off. The idea is that the supervisor would then be changed their level of effort according to the value they place on the outcomes. There is the string linkage between effort and outcomes. Therefore, if you don't believe increased outcome will not increase your performance, or you don't believe increased performance will increase your reward, or you don't value the reward, then you may not be motivated by the expectancy theory. This means that even if your organization achieves all two statements, that you will not be motivated, as three statements are required for positive motivation. The expectancy theory of motivation and Maslow's list hierarchy theory or the respect to factor theories. They pay attention at the relationship between internal lists and the resulting effort expected to fulfill them. Expectancy theory does not concentrate on it, but focus on outcome instead. The expectancy theory hypothesis that is in order for a person to be motivated, his effort, performance, and the motivations must be linked. Is proposed three variables to account for it, which he called a valence, expectancy, and instrumentality. Expectancy is the belief that increased effort will induce increased performance, which means if I work harder, then the performance will be better. It's affected by such things as more time, more resources, or more skill were used, or more supporting for the performance will be better. In-school mentality is the belief that if you perform well, the value outcome will be received, which means if you do a good job, there is something in it for me. It is affected by such way. Clear understanding of relationship between performance and outcomes. For example, the rules of the reward, my teammate has mentioned it before. The trust in supervisor who will take the decision on who get what outcomes, or transparency of the purpose that is who get that what outcome. Relevancy is important that individual based on the expected outcome. For example, if I am mainly motivated by money, I may not value offer of additional time off. The idea is that the supervisor would then be changed their level of effort according to the value they place on the outcomes. There is the string linkage between effort and outcomes. Therefore, if you don't believe increased outcome will not increase your performance, or you don't believe increased performance will increase your reward, or you don't value the reward, then you may not be motivated by the expectancy theory. This means that even if your organization achieves all two statements, that you will not be motivated, as three statements are required for positive motivation. As a result, based on the performance appraisal function, or whatever this XSO cannot fulfill the performance appraisal function, then you may ask, how could the agency effectively implement and strengthen the performance appraisal process? We find another XSO as an example. There's a clear instruction about the overall rating, such as outstanding grade, 3-point increments, good grade, then 2-point increments. If the overall rating is not satisfactory, probation extended, low increment, downgrade, or even termination. As we have not shown the upper part, the overall ratings were automatically generating from different parts of rating with a 5-point scale. Then our group prepare a discussion topic for classmates to discuss. Students were divided into 15 groups according to your presentation group.